Journey to discover classic and mysterious cases, unrevealed conspiracies, hidden truths. Let's explore with Street Detective TV. Welcome to Street Detective TV. The case of Thomas Silverstein, the longest person in solitary confinement in America. Thomas Silverstein is one of the most famous criminals in the history of the American prison system, not because of his violent crimes, but because of the time he spent in solitary confinement. Silverstein was held in solitary confinement for more than 30 years and is the longest-serving person in the history of the American prison system. His story not only reflects the harshness of the American criminal justice system, but also raises many questions about prisoners' rights, prison conditions, and the consequences of prolonged solitary confinement. Let's explore this case with Street Detective TV. Thomas Silverstein's path to crime. Thomas Silverstein, born February 4th, 1952 in Long Beach, California, began his life in an unstable and violent family environment. Silverstein's mother, who had been married 3 times, was a major influence on his personality and criminal career. Witnessing the constant changes in his family environment and influenced by his mother's violent lifestyle, Silverstein gradually developed a hatred and difficulty in integrating into the surrounding community. From an early age, Silverstein encountered many difficulties in social relationships. He was often bullied by his peers because they mistook him for a Jew. One of the children who bullied him, Gary, became the target of a violent revenge by Silverstein's mother. Once, when seeing Gary walking home from school, Silverstein's mother pulled him into the backyard and asked Silverstein to hit Gary back in retaliation. Silverstein recalled, "I looked at my mother, looked at the black belt, and looked at Gary. There was no other choice. I hit him as hard as I could." The anger and frustration from the psychological trauma had been building up in Silverstein since childhood, and this event was the starting point for his violent path. The incident did not stop there, as the next day, Gary's father came to take revenge by doing the same. Silverstein's anger and feelings of being insulted were not properly released. Instead of advising him, his mother taught Silverstein a lesson of an eye for an eye by driving to Gary's family home and throwing bricks at their windows. These actions taught Silverstein that violence was the only way to deal with the provocation and suffering he had to endure, from juvenile delinquency to prison. By the age of 14, Silverstein's anger could no longer be contained. He stole a car and attacked a police officer, an act that not only brought him to face legal punishment, but also marked a clear change in his personality. Silverstein was no longer an innocent child. He chose the path of crime, resisting all efforts of society and the legal system. After being arrested and sent to a California juvenile reform school, Silverstein showed dissatisfaction and lack of faith in the authorities. However, being released did not help him improve his behavior. Immediately after his release, Silverstein began to indulge in drugs, participating in armed robberies to get money to buy drugs. He participated in violent robberies, acting blindly without any sympathy or remorse. In 1971, when he was only 19 years old, Silverstein was arrested with his cousin and stepfather Thomas Conway for participating in an armed robbery. As a result, Silverstein was sent to the famous San Quentin prison, which became an indispensable home in his life. Life in prison and death row, the endless journey of Thomas Silverstein. After being paroled in 1975, Thomas Silverstein soon reoffended and resumed his life of crime. Despite being given a chance to start over, he could not escape the violent and cruel nature ingrained in him from his troubled childhood and unstable family environment. Returning to society was not easy for someone like Silverstein, as he was viewed by society as an outlaw, someone who was incapable of reintegrating or rebuilding his life. Shortly after his release, Silverstein participated in 2 armed robberies in 1975, which prevented him from returning to a life of freedom. In these robberies, Silverstein and his accomplices stole a total of $11,000, a large sum at the time. These armed robberies were a clear indication that Silverstein had no intention of changing his ways. He was not only committing crimes to survive, but was also attracted to the feeling of power and violence that these acts brought. With his repeated offences, Silverstein was arrested and brought to trial in Leavenworth, Kansas in 1977. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a hefty sentence for someone with a criminal record like Silverstein. However, when he entered prison this time, Silverstein was no ordinary prisoner. He was not just a common criminal, but also an extremely dangerous individual with an uncontrollable violent nature. The path of crime in prison and the Aryan Brotherhood. After being convicted and sent to Leavenworth Prison, which is home to many dangerous criminals, Thomas Silverstein continued to sink deeper into the world of organised crime. Here, he joined the Aryan Brotherhood, one of the most famous and brutal gangs in American prisons. This gang not only has a strong influence in the prison environment, but is also known for its criminal activities outside of society, including drug trafficking, murder, and organised robberies. Silverstein's entry into the Aryan Brotherhood was not an accident, but a strategic decision. Once he joined the gang, he had to obey strict orders from the leaders. Silverstein's actions were no longer just individual mistakes, but were directed within the framework of the gang. One of the most notable crimes during this time was the murder of Danny Atwell, an inmate in the same prison, because Atwell refused to help the gang smuggle drugs into the prison. Atwell's decision not to cooperate cost him his life. Silverstein, along with other gang members, brutally murdered Atwell, making clear the message that anyone who resisted the control of the Aryan Brotherhood would face death. After Atwell's murder, Silverstein was sentenced to life in prison and transferred to another prison, the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, where he would become an even more dangerous criminal. Here, his life became increasingly dark, caught in a spiral of violence from which he could not escape. However, a notable event occurred in 1985, when the court reconsidered Silverstein's conviction after it was revealed that witnesses had lied in the previous case, the murder of Robert Chappelle and the Savage Revenge. Although his conviction may have been reconsidered not long after, Silverstein and another inmate, Clayton Fountain, committed another brutal murder in the prison. This involved Robert Chappelle, a member of the DC Black Gang. Chappelle was reportedly killed while incarcerated in Marion. He was the target of revenge by the Aryan Brotherhood, and Silverstein and Fountain planned and carried out the murder. At that time, Raymond Cadillac Smith, the leader of the DC gang, was transferred to Marion to continue facing his charges. In retaliation for Chappelle's death, Smith planned to attack members of the Aryan Brotherhood, including Silverstein. However, before Smith could carry out his plan, Silverstein and Fountain struck first. In an extremely brutal attack, Silverstein and Fountain used sharp knives to stab Raymond Cadillac Smith 67 times in the body. The scene of this murder was extremely savage and cruel. Smith, who had previously been known as a notorious leader of the Black Gang, died on the spot, collapsing in front of the two prisoners without a chance to fight back. This act was not only cold revenge, but also an assertion of the power of the Aryan Brotherhood, proving that the gang could kill anyone, even the most famous criminals, if they did not submit. The murder of Smith became one of the bloodiest and most shocking events in the history of Marion Prison. It not only highlights Silverstein's brutality, but also reflects the brutality of gangs in American prisons, where every decision, every action can lead to death. The murder of Smith also marked a turning point in Silverstein's criminal career, making him one of the most hated and dangerous criminals in the US federal prison system. Murder and solitary confinement, the turning point of Thomas Silverstein's life. In 1983, while serving his sentence at the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, Thomas Silverstein committed an act that shocked the US federal prison system. He killed a prison security officer, Colorado, Merle O'Neill. This was not just a normal prison murder case, but an event that changed Silverstein's life forever, making him one of the most dangerous prisoners in American history. Circumstances leading to the murder. The circumstances leading to the murder stemmed from the ongoing tension within Marion Prison, which was known for housing dangerous inmates and having a strong gang presence. Silverstein, a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, had developed hostile relationships with several inmates and prison staff. This relationship was not only based on the natural antagonism between inmates and prison staff, but was also fueled by conflicts of power and interest within the prison. CO Merle O'Neill was one of the correctional officers tasked with supervising dangerous inmates, including Silverstein. According to multiple sources, O'Neill was said to have had personal conflicts with Silverstein, leading to growing animosity between the two. Some reports suggest that O'Neill took actions that Silverstein considered offensive or unfair, such as imposing harsh discipline or preventing activities that Silverstein considered his right in prison. The murder. On the day of the incident, a fight broke out in the prison between inmates, and during the chaos, Silverstein took advantage of the opportunity to attack CO Merle O'Neill. He used a homemade knife, a weapon that prisoners often make in prison, to kill O'Neill. The attack was carried out with extreme brutality, and O'Neill had no chance of survival. This action not only shocked Marion Prison, but also shook the entire federal prison system. The killing of a prison guard by an inmate is an extremely serious event, especially in a prison considered the highest security in the United States. The murder not only highlighted Silverstein's violence, but also showed the inability of the prison system to control dangerous prisoners like him. Legal consequences. After the murder, Silverstein was brought to trial and convicted of murder. He received an additional sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole and was considered one of the most dangerous prisoners in the United States. However, the sentence was not only a punishment for the murder, but also a reflection of the brutality and danger that Silverstein had demonstrated throughout his time in prison. Solitary confinement, life in absolute isolation. After being convicted of murdering a prison guard, Thomas Silverstein was transferred to the Special Housing Unit, SHU, at the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. This is one of the most secure areas of the US prison system, designed specifically for the most dangerous prisoners who are likely to cause chaos or threaten the safety of the prison. The conditions of detention here are considered extremely harsh, completely isolating prisoners like Silverstein from society and other prisoners. Description of Special Confinement 1. The confinement space Silverstein's cell was designed as a discrete steel box, about 2.5 mx 3m wide. The walls of the room were built of thick concrete, with no windows or any exits to see outside. The lighting in the room is artificial, maintained 24 hours a day, making it impossible for prisoners to distinguish between day and night. The door. A solid steel plate with only a small slit at chest level for passing food or communicating with the prison guards. The bed. A concrete slab protruding from the wall with a thin mattress on top. The table and chairs. A cast into the wall to prevent them from being used as weapons. The toilet. A metal toilet integrated with a small sink located right in the room. 2. Surveillance system. All of Silverstein's activities in the cell are closely monitored via security cameras. Even when he showers or eats, the prison guards monitor him through a remote monitoring system. The staff only come into direct contact with him when absolutely necessary and are always fully equipped with defensive weapons. 3. Time out. Silverstein was only allowed to leave his cell for 1 hour a day, and even that hour was held in a small yard, surrounded by high concrete walls or steel mesh, ensuring that he could not see or interact with anyone. During this time, he was not allowed to speak to or meet with any inmates or staff. 4. Absolute isolation. Silverstein was completely isolated from the outside world. He was not allowed to receive letters or visits from family, friends, or lawyers without strict screening. Even phone calls or written communication were kept to a minimum. Psychological effects of isolation. Solitary confinement was not only physically isolating, but it also had a profound effect on Silverstein's mental health. Scientific studies have shown that long-term isolation in such conditions can cause serious psychological problems, including 1. Depression and anxiety. Silverstein faced a constant feeling of loneliness without any form of social interaction. This easily led to severe depressive symptoms, including feelings of hopelessness, disorientation and lack of purpose in life. 2. Sleep disorders. The lack of exposure to natural light and the day-night cycle caused Silverstein to have problems with sleep, leading to chronic sleep disorders. He often suffered from insomnia, restless sleep, or nightmares. 3. Paranoia and psychosis. Being completely isolated from all stimuli, social isolation can lead to cognitive dysfunction, including paranoia, hallucinations, and even loss of the ability to distinguish between reality. 4. Self-destruction. Prolonged despair sometimes leads prisoners in solitary confinement to self-harm or develop violent behaviours. Silverstein, although not known to have self-harmed, became extremely quiet and withdrawn after years of isolation. The purpose of solitary confinement. The prison system believes that solitary confinement is necessary to control an extremely dangerous prisoner like Silverstein. To the justice system, Silverstein is not only a criminal, but also a threat to the prison staff, other prisoners, and the stability of the entire prison. Keeping him in strict conditions is considered a last resort to prevent any danger he may pose. Solitary confinement. Life in absolute isolation. After being convicted of murdering a prison guard, Thomas Silverstein was transferred to the Special Housing Unit, SHU, at the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. This is one of the most secure areas of the US prison system, designed specifically for the most dangerous prisoners who are likely to cause chaos or threaten the safety of the prison. The conditions of detention here are considered extremely harsh, completely isolating prisoners like Silverstein from society and other prisoners. Description of Special Confinement 1. The confinement space Silverstein's cell was designed as a discrete steel box, about 2.5 x 3m wide. The walls of the room were built of thick concrete, with no windows or any exits to see outside. The lighting in the room is artificial, maintained 24 hours a day, making it impossible for prisoners to distinguish between day and night. To the door, a solid steel plate with only a small slit at chest level for passing food or communicating with the prison guards. Oh, the bed. A concrete slab protruding from the wall with a thin mattress on top. Oh, the table and chairs are cast into the wall to prevent them from being used as weapons. The toilet. A metal toilet integrated with a small sink, located right in the room. 2. Surveillance system. All of Silverstein's activities in the cell are closely monitored via security cameras. Even when he showers or eats, the prison guards monitor him through a remote monitoring system. The staff only come into direct contact with him when absolutely necessary, and are always fully equipped with defensive weapons. 3. Time out. Silverstein was only allowed to leave his cell for 1 hour a day, and even that hour was held in a small yard, surrounded by high concrete walls or steel mesh, ensuring that he could not see or interact with anyone. During this time, he was not allowed to speak to or meet with any inmates or staff. 4. Absolute isolation. Silverstein was completely isolated from the outside world. He was not allowed to receive letters or visits from family, friends, or lawyers without strict screening. Even phone calls or written communication were kept to a minimum. Psychological effects of isolation. Solitary confinement was not only physically isolating, but it also had a profound effect on Silverstein's mental health. Scientific studies have shown that long-term isolation in such conditions can cause serious psychological problems, including 1. Depression and anxiety. Silverstein faced a constant feeling of loneliness, without any form of social interaction. This easily led to severe depressive symptoms, including feelings of hopelessness, disorientation, and lack of purpose in life. 2. Sleep disorders. The lack of exposure to natural light and the day-night cycle caused Silverstein to have problems with sleep, leading to chronic sleep disorders. He often suffered from insomnia, restless sleep, or nightmares. 3. Paranoia and psychosis. Being completely isolated from all social stimulation can lead to cognitive disorders, including paranoid states, hallucinations, and even the inability to distinguish reality. 4. Self-destruction. Prolonged despair sometimes leads prisoners in solitary confinement to self-harm or develop violent behaviour. Silverstein, although not known to have self-harmed, became extremely quiet and withdrawn after years of isolation. The purpose of solitary confinement. The prison system believes that solitary confinement is necessary to control an extremely dangerous prisoner like Silverstein. To the legal system, Silverstein is not only a criminal, but also a threat to the prison staff, other prisoners, and the stability of the entire prison. Keeping him in strict conditions is considered a last resort to prevent any danger he may pose, a life without escape. Solitary confinement lost for Silverstein's 30-year sentence was not just a form of punishment, but a life without a way out. He had no chance of reintegration, no hope of parole, and no ability to change his reality. This turned his life into an endless cycle of isolation and despair, where there was no room for redemption or rebirth. 2005, Thomas Silverstein and the Florence Super Prison, ADX, in Colorado. In 2005, after more than 2 decades of harsh conditions at Marion, Illinois, Thomas Silverstein was transferred to ADX Florence in Colorado, one of the most maximum security prisons in the United States. Known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, ADX Florence houses the most dangerous and isolated prisoners in the US federal prison system. ADX Florence, the maximum security super prison 1. Design and objectives, ADX. Florence was specifically designed to house prisoners who were considered extremely dangerous, irredeemable, or likely to pose a significant threat in conventional prisons. The prison opened in 1994 and was built in response to the violence and murders within the federal prison system, including the cases involving Thomas Silverstein. ADX Florence consists of multiple housing units, from the high security unit to the full security unit, H unit, where Silverstein is held. This area is designed to completely isolate inmates from the outside world, from natural light to social interaction. The prison has more than 490 individual cells, each measuring only 7 by 12 feet, with doors made of reinforced steel. 2. Conditions of confinement. At ADX Florence, Silverstein must live in complete isolation. His cell is a sealed concrete steel box with no windows, except for a small slot that allows a view of the sky. The interior includes a concrete bed, a metal toilet with a built-in sink, and a desk built into the wall. All meals were delivered through a small slot in the door, ensuring that Silverstein had no direct contact with correctional staff. He was only allowed to leave his cell for an hour a day, to walk around a small yard surrounded by wire mesh where even sunlight was limited. When he did go outside, he had to wear handcuffs and ankle cuffs for his safety. 3. Strict surveillance. ADX Florence is equipped with a state-of-the-art surveillance camera system which tracks every inmate's movements 24 hours a day. All communications, from letters to rare phone calls, were tightly controlled and monitored. For Silverstein, this meant he would never have a moment of privacy for the rest of his life. The impact of ADX Florence on Silverstein's life. 1. Absolute isolation. The move to ADX Florence did not bring any positive changes for Silverstein, but only continued the absolute isolation he had endured for the previous 2 decades. At ADX Florence, this isolation is taken to a new level, where even a glimpse of another person becomes impossible. Inmates at ADX Florence, like Silverstein, often describe feeling alive and dead, as they are completely deprived of the ability to interact with people and their surroundings. 2. Mental health studies show that long-term confinement in conditions like those at ADX Florence can cause serious mental health problems, including severe depression, chronic anxiety, psychosis, and even self-destructive behaviours. For Silverstein, these effects were exacerbated by the decades of isolation he endured before arriving at ADX Florence. Silverstein once described this feeling of isolation as a constant torture, with each passing day being spent repeating the same meaningless actions in a cramped space. 3. A space with no escape. ADX Florence is not just a prison, but also a mental destruction machine. Prisoners like Silverstein face the feeling of being completely forgotten by the outside world, with no chance of reform or change. This isolation is not just a punishment, but also a never-ending sentence, where each passing day feels like a new punishment. ADX Florence's legacy and the questions it raises Silverstein's transfer to ADX Florence is not just a security measure, but also a symbol of how the American justice system treats prisoners who are considered as irredeemable. However, his story also raises many questions about the humaneness of incarceration. Is absolute isolation really the best solution for dealing with prisoners like Silverstein? Or is it just a form of prolonged mental torture? Has the prison system failed to reform and rehabilitate people like him, turning them into symbols of despair and violence? With his transfer to ADX Florence, Thomas Silverstein spent the final years of his life in absolute isolation, with no hope, no redemption, and no chance to be remembered as anything other than the most dangerous criminal. His story is a haunting reminder of the limitations and failures of the modern prison system. After 36 years in solitary confinement, Silverstein fell seriously ill following heart surgery and died on May 11th, 2019, closing his life of crime and lonely life in solitary confinement. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to explore shocking true crime stories, unsolved mysteries, and secrets yet to be uncovered. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue bringing exciting, high-quality content. Thank you for joining us on this journey.